So awareness, as it expands as the universe, expands as creation, expands at the expense of its own contraction. So it's two-in-one movements. It expands and contracts. It expands as universe, but contracts as awareness. Likewise, at the opposite pole of these affairs. So individual can be spoken of as the utmost contraction in awareness, whilst utmost expansion as universe.
This kind of goes into like the individual perspective that you've been speaking about all day with Armand and Jake. You mentioned that what happens in one person can affect all of creation. And that kind of struck a chord with me because when I started awakening, I had the very similar question. I asked the universe. I was like, can one person heal themselves so profoundly that it has an effect on all of creation? So it was very similar. And after I asked that question to the universe, things really started taking off and progressively, like, kind of proving that point that, yeah, it definitely is true to me. It seemed like, and then that was about 7 years ago, and I saw one of your videos. It was called Healing at the Ultimate Level, and you mentioned that one person can heal a whole nation. And it kind of connected with that, like you can heal yourself so profoundly, in my mind, that you can heal a whole nation. And with I'm kind of like confused a little bit about how exactly like you're healing in Trika Shaivism, you know. Like how is it that you are healing at the ultimate level? It's because there is no other, and to me it's like on one hand, from my perspective, it seems like I'm healing myself, and in various ways, from traumas, generational curses, I guess you could call them. And soul retrieval was one of them. But it's like, how does that translate into Trika Shaivism? Is what my question is.
Not sure not sure if I understand what you mean. How does that translate into the Trika Shaivism?
Is it more like a soul? Like, it's not really healing in Trika Shaivism. I was thinking it's I can't think of the word really right now, but it's
well, maybe where you have started, that what caught your attention in the first place, the individual and how can individual impact the collective.
Yeah, it's like a soul recalibration, kind of like.
Well, I don't know what soul recalibration means. I don't know what it means. I'm not familiar.
How do you heal at the ultimate level? Then, would you mind elaborating on that? I guess that's the gist of my question.
How do you heal on the ultimate level?
Yeah.
At the ultimate level, you realize that you have never been sick. That's all there is. Because at the ultimate level, nothing really happens. Shiva is immune to anything. So this is one, let's say, key understanding. So that this is a quantum understanding. So let's maybe bring some clarity, because certain things are spoken in advance. Certain things are said with an encouragement, and not to be taken at the face value and immediately applied to oneself, although spoken as an encouragement. That Maharishi used to say, we all kick universe all of us are kick universe in a certain direction. So let us be conscious how we do that. But really, if we look at it now, since this question from you comes, and I'm not even sure if this is exactly the answer that you're looking for, but I want to first perhaps tweak our understanding in terms of who impacts what, and at what level, to what degree, because this will be very, very important to understand. So remember this in the drawings that we did. This also contains this simultaneously. Why? Because this diagrammatically is spoken simultaneously in terms of absolute as compact mass of awareness undergoes progressive transfiguration by progressively limiting its omniscient qualities in order for the multiplicity and the creation per se to take, right? So, in other words, speaking from the physical point of view, there is a tremendous dissipation of energy, like unbelievable dissipation of energy. In a way, the analogy with the vacuum. Have you heard, for example, this striking comparison that is given sometimes to impress that 1 cubical centimeter of vacuum contains the energy mass of the entire visible universe? I came across that like when I was, I was also interested in astronomy and, cosmology. So it's like 1 cubical centimeter of vacuum contains the same amount of energy as the entire visible universe. So, in other words, this kind of just as an analogy. So this movement of expansion, also can be spoken simultaneously as this movement because that expansion is congruent to contraction. So awareness, as it expands as the universe, expands as creation, expands at the expense of its own contraction. So it's 2-in-1 movements. It expands and contracts. It expands as universe, but contracts as awareness. Likewise, at the opposite pole of these affairs. So individual can be spoken of as the utmost contraction in awareness, whilst utmost expansion as universe. So that process in reverse is seen as now also containing these two aspects simultaneously. On one hand, it is the regathering, reconfiguration, and reabsorption of that dissipated force, dissipated power, into its singularity. And at the very same time, it's expansion of contracted individual. So it again, at this pole of affairs, contains the very two opposite movements at once. On one hand, it's expansion of individual, but contraction. You see? Contraction of what? You can tell me now.
Awareness of the individual?
Exactly. So in other words, as it is done, so it is undone. Now, if we kind of revisited this model, right? This, because we are working with this as a model. What would be here interesting to observe is that the impact each and every one of us has is to the proportion and to the degree, or in other words, paramount to the way that process is intact. So at the very, very, let's say, contracted point, in other words, where we are simply experiencing ourselves as individual and bust, that impact is to the minimum. It has to be. It cannot be otherwise. Its impact is still there, but its impact, we can speak about it, let's say, with an example from Newtonian physics. According to the laws of the mechanics, there is gravity between all objects, all of them. So when the apple falls on the planet Earth, it is also not incorrect to say that Earth falls on the apple. Two bodies. But the impact of the apple is so minute compared to the mass of Earth that the gravitational force of Earth is so much greater than, even though, theoretically speaking, there is an impact, but it is like, it's not even nil, it's beyond nil. There is no impact. But as the body gets bigger, then the impact is there. That's the dance of Earth and the Moon. The Moon constantly impacts the whole life on the planet by virtue of that gravitation, of these gravitational forces. So the impact of that completely contracted awareness as an individual on the universe and its laws is next to nothing. You see? So this is what I said. With all the encouragement, with all this, all of us are impacting the universe, let's just set the record straight. So the impact begins at that level when awareness begins to expand. In other words, individual awareness now begins to expand. So this process of descent and ascent is paramount to the amount of awareness. The more aware we are, the more impact we have. And that awareness is, of course, anatomically, in the terms of in esoteric anatomy, spoken of is exemplified by prana shakti, aka Kundalini. It's a movement of Kundalini. So in the Indian tradition, to speak about how aware one is, it can be spoken in reverse in terms of to the degree of how alive or enlivened one's Kundalini, that is to the degree one's consciousness is alive. So it's a complete and utter correlation. So at some point in the process of expansion, this is what I meant in the aforementioned by video, that a single individual can have impact equivalent of healing the city or the nation. I would recommend you one book by late Wayne Dyer. I remember that guy. It's a fascinating because this kind of, with all that what's being spoken, this conversation kind of went off, where I think it's so important right now, more than ever. We'll have to find out, because I gave these examples before. Maybe in some of our archives we have the title of that book. Where, I don't know, maybe. Where he gives example of the studies made by Hawkins in terms of the impact of awakened consciousness in its proportion to the population. In this case, it's spoken in terms of number of people. And I read it many years ago, that's why I don't even remember the book. I read it like some 25 years ago, maybe more, in the 90s, soon as it was published. And of course, it was very, very analogous and very close to the teachings of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi with the Meissner effect, right? The superconductor in terms of groups of meditators and the impact on the collective consciousness and so forth. So when, in fact, someone brought that, just like, look, Rick, this is, and I was like, wow, interesting. So this analogy is someone whose consciousness vibrates at the velocity of what is spoken of as an average, in other words, sleepwalker, and completely unawakened, completely, person who minds her business, lives, right? Their impact is, like practically no impact. The impact is very, 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 very modest on the environment. But there is some impact, because this impact is measured in terms of the energetic impact, in terms of, like, let's say, the way our heart emits electromagnetic waves. And then it begins to speak about different levels of consciousness. So the beings whose awareness now, and Hawkins gives this ratio there as well. Like literally, I don't even know if he was measured in terms of the brainwave activity or heart rate activity. Studies that have been made in Sofia University, even at our immersions. Sundari undergone one such thing. I was fully wired as well at the Science of Non-Duality. And the director of that Sofia University came to conduct this research in Templeton. Were you there, Kamala, when it was like the... Yeah. So this, then what begins to really get interesting and fascinating is that there is this point where quantum leap happens. Like, let's say, the impact of an awakened person whose consciousness vibrates at that degree of velocity begins to impact as many people in the radius of his or her influence as 10,000 people. But then it goes 100,000 people. Then it goes, and it's just like a geometrical progression, quantum leap. See?
Butterfly.
Yes, exactly. And then the kind of like entering now the speculation. So conclusions this Wayne Dreyer in that book makes. So we can just imagine what some of these historical figures of the statue, like, let's say, that Jesus Christ enjoyed, you know, like this really, really, the so-called avatars, right? What the impact? The impact is like literally that one single person could impact the whole city of 5 to 8 million people. So what's more interesting is that I have personally have this, don't ask me where that information comes from, but I have these insights that because of the demographic explosion that at some point was reaching its peak, I don't know how many of you have come across this information, but apparently we are beyond that spike, when the population of planet Earth no longer increasing. It's now actually is on the decrease slightly. But there was this, remember that crazy kind of like, wow, we are like really getting many here. By the 90s, we were like, what was that? Who remembers? How many billion we were? Yeah, something like that, yeah. So there was this talks about that it will double by the year. And then suddenly, after that spike, it shows. So you see, it shows that we have no idea in terms of what governs these processes. The same as what governs the migration. We think that the economical reasons, but migrations are completely different. It's a DNA that migrates. It's a completely another sign, another science. Some people already venturing into that. You know, like Europe is now in a frenzy of being taken by barbarians, the so-called. You know, that's how they refer to. Many countries are now doing everything they can to shut their borders because they are afraid to become the minority. The vicious fight that Israel now put against Palestine again, because they do that repeatedly, is because the demographics are such, they will be outnumbered in no time. Because demographically, Palestinians will outnumber Israel if it's one state. But we're speaking about it now from the perspective of something else behind the scenes. So these insights of the demographic explosion gave me the sense that the reason why awakening is on the rise is because we're simply more as earthlings. At the time when 5,000 years ago, it was enough to have Buddha and already have massive influence, enough to have Mahavira, enough to have this and this and this, let's say, so-called sages and saints to keep the balance, keep the, that necessarily balance. So the influence there, see, the powers are squared. And now, look at like the size of the population of Mexico City, Yokohama, Tokyo, Beijing, New York, and so on, Los Angeles. How is it all squared? See? So I would even say and go as far as there are beings whose consciousness is at the exalted state and they may not even know that in terms of what to do with it. I've met these people, factually encountered them in London. I've seen them before and I thought they're nuts, homeless, or just simply like mavericks. But when I went through my process, my consciousness connected to their consciousness of vibrations. And I felt the sync. I realized, and when the eyes met, this guy is not crazy. This guy is not nuts. You see? And the next I see this guy who was like walking very fast and wearing coat. Summer, winter, doesn't matter, the same coat. He actually looks like a spitting image of this very well-known Jewish mystic. His name will come to me. And one day I was astonished. In a local synagogue in North London, he was treated by the clergy there with tremendous respect. And he doesn't go into synagogue or anything, it's just like, and they were just giving him them gifts and something, you know. But he looks totally disheveled, totally crazy, totally like, you know, he walks, all the people move away. And there was another guy who was, he was wearing the skirt, even in the freezing, bringing winter. You know? I once had I told that story. I once got this stuff from the Maison Blanc, because as they closed down, that's crazy stuff. They threw away at the end of the day all the bakery, all the brilliant bread. Threw away. Black bean bags, dispose. I said, what are you doing, guys? You crazy? Look, there's a home. This is for homeless. There's just literally like 200 meters, 300 meters. That's where the homeless get their soup. You know, their bread doesn't look anywhere near as great as this. Croissants to die for. Maison Blanc, French brand. This shop in St. John's Wood, you know, posh area. Paul McCartney buys his flowers. I mean it, like literally. I've seen him all the time there, you know. And they like, sir, you can have anything you want, but we can't do that. It's against our policy. It's a policy. Whatever is not sold has to be disposed. It was capitalism, right? Dump milk down into the ocean just to keep the price of milk, you know, during the time when people starved in America in the 30s, during the Great Depression. So it's like a rudimentary thing. So they give me all this bag with all the goodies. You know, all the croissants, cinnamon, Danish like. So I go and so I'm going to go and give it to this guy. And I go, and this guy is there, sitting there. So I was like, hungry? He's looking at me like that. So I opened the bag and it's like giving him like, sorry. I just messed up the story. So I passed by him and I thought maybe offering him food like that off the bat is a bit. So I like, and he's sitting like as if asking for money. The whole thing is right. So I go into my pocket and I get this like pounds, you know, like 5 pounds. This is 20 years ago, you know, in coins. And I thrust that into his hand, right? And he looks at it like this in the light, like almost as if trying, this is the golden. Then he takes it like that, right? Takes my hand, puts it back, and then opens my bag like that, Just like without even asking, like opens like that, goes there, takes the like croissant or something, and just okay, cool, man. All right, great. Do you want something else? No, it doesn't speak at all. So that's all. Just like to adjust this. See, this movement, that movement, that movement, this movement. So the impact is only equivalent to where consciousness is. So at some point, the impact on the universe at the point of singularity is absolute. Absolute impact, massive impact, irreversible impact. See? And at the point when it is utmost contraction, what kind of energy there is to impact? Wishful thinking. But encouragement is still given, you see? In advance. So we know we contain that power. We carry that power.